Hey everybody, this is Perch. Let me preface this by saying that I mean no offense to the friends of mine who are writers. I've got a lot of friends who are writers in the comic book industry and writers outside the comic book industry. I've got a lot of friends who are writers. I was trying to think before I start recording this. Am I gonna piss off the majority of my friends or some in the middle? I think I'm pretty split. I've got very close artist friends. The funny thing is, I think the in the comic industry, the people who are the closest to me are probably artists. But I have a lot of I have a lot of writer friends. I have very close writer friends. This video is going to piss off the writer friends. I'm just be well, maybe not. It depends on your self awareness. But if this is one of those truth moments, and there's a lot of I've been listening to. I go in waves where I listen to more videos from outside. I still have no idea. Like every now and then, somebody tells me like I'm going to launch this crowdfunding book on Monday, and people are like, "Oh, you're taking a shot at this other guy over here. He always does a show on Monday." I'm like, I have no idea who does a show whatever days. Apparently, there's the lawyer guy does a show on Friday. When I do a show, okay, I sure. I mean, if I was, I don't even know what to say to that. I'm not paying attention. If there's one of you out there, by the way, who feels like I am somehow screwing you by putting my videos out at a certain time that conflict with your videos, I mean, like by all means, let me know. Tell me I'm doing it. I'm actually willing to listen. I'll move. I don't give a shit. To be blunt about it, if the time slot works better for you, I mean, I don't really care. I'm putting this stuff out. I guarantee you, there is not a secret plot to screw with you. I know there is because everybody talks. Every like I got these screenshots from this private group and a couple people are like planning on how to counter program my streams on Friday to try and take viewers away, and I'm like, yeah, you guys are a bunch of pathetic tiny dicked assholes. Anyway, sorry. Now we'll get to the point of this video. But I am just being out. There's some people who are incredibly insecure in this YouTube community who I think everybody believes they're at the top. People with like way more subscribers than I have that are way oversensitive about this stuff. You know who you are. Anyway, it's silly. It really is silly. This is not a content. At least for me, I'm not competing. If I could turn off the ads on my videos, I would do it right now. But YouTube will promptly then stop putting me anywhere. So anyway, whatever. Here's my point. And again, as long as I'm pissing off lots of people, let's go one step further, and this will irritate the writers. I believe in a great story. I love stories. And to the point, I've talked about Chris Claremont to the point that I have had people in the comments talk about how much I gay for Chris Claremont. I love Chris Claremont, though. I think he's first of all, he's great in person, but he writes great stories, very involved, cool stuff. I love it. Another guy I like a lot, Peter David. I've got books signed by Peter David. I think he writes wonderful things. I am not completely on board. I mean, like there was a time, 2010, like some of the stuff that was going on with Bendis in the early Avengers days, pretty cool stuff. Jeff Johns, pretty awesome. Lots of great writers. Ann Nocenti, yes. Louise Simonson. Here's a hot take for you. I think Louise Simonson. I've appreciated Louise Simonson more than Walt Simonson because Louise Simonson has written some amazing things that have given me great memories. I love writers. I love great stories. I love all that stuff. However, comic books are a visual medium. We all know that, right? I mean, at this point, like I'm not. This isn't a shocking take. The art sells the book, and the thing that's gone backwards, I would say, over the last 15 years, bluntly, is that if you have an amazing artist on a book, it's going to sell. It's going to promote. You don't need to do anything. If right now Marvel signed Todd McFarlane to come over and draw Spider-Man, they wouldn't have to put out a single piece of advertising whatsoever. Actually, the only advertising they need to put out is Todd McFarlane's drawing Spider-Man in January. The end. That's it. They don't even need to show a single picture. They need to do nothing. That book's going to sell 1 million copies. Literally, I'm serious. I think 1 million copies. If Marvel again puts out a press release, Jim Lee drawing an issue of X-Men February, you don't need to do a single thing. That's going to sell 1 million copies. I mean, Rob Liefeld is a guy who is no longer a. I mean, he does infrequent things, but Rob Liefeld, who legendary artist, and I can't diss Rob Liefeld. I paid my rent off Rob Liefeld comics, point blank. We can complain about the fact that he is not drawing feet or that his Captain America has giant boobs or whatever. We can complain about that all we want, and you're not wrong. But he sold comics, and if you are in the business of doing business, that counts. That's going to do the job. And I think that there's this interesting thing that's developed over the last 15 years where the comic publishers and the industry chats up the writers. You see Bendis, certainly, Tom King, Scott Snyder. You see Warren Ellis. Well, not anymore, but you know what I mean. You see these writers promoted. And these are nice people. I mean, I have nothing against Scott Snyder. He's great. But let's be honest here. In the Batman series that had Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo was a major. That was the visual selling point of that book. Snyder is a big name. Again, none of this is taking away from the writers, but if you've got a killer artist on a book, you're good. Brett Booth did these issues of X-Men. If you announced Brett Booth was going to be doing some comics, if you suddenly said Avengers, Jason Aaron, Brett Booth, and he showed some Brett Booth art, people are going to be buying that for Brett Booth. I understand some weirdos on Twitter are going to want to complain about something Brett Booth said about Israel like 5 years ago. I don't even think I have no idea actually, but I think that's wrong. So I apologize if I'm tying accusations where they don't belong. Art sells books. And in comics, we've gone down this very weird path where we're all pretending that art is almost secondary to the writing. But everyone knows that's bullshit. Everyone knows. When Marvel comes out, it's like, superstar writer Kelly Thompson's got this new comic. It's like, yeah, who's the artist on it? You could say all you want about superstar writer. You could say G. Willow Wilson's on another book, amazing, but it's going to live or die by the art. I'm sorry, it will. You can put the most amazing, like, think of whatever the absolute top name. James Tynion is a big name right now, going off doing Substack stuff. Jonathan Hickman. But we've seen how this plays out. John Hickman has done books with unknown, no-name artists who did not move the needle in terms of, when you actually see the art. And what's the result? I mean, it doesn't sell well. Why isn't Jonathan Hickman, for his indie work, Hickman did God is Dead. He's done a lot of books that sell under 10,000. Why? I guarantee you, if Todd McFarlane is drawing a book, it is not selling under 50,000. That's not a guess. That's truth. We know from the numbers. Artists move books because this is a visual medium. Now, this does not mean, of course, nothing is extreme. It doesn't mean that if you put Todd McFarlane on a book and you have some, I don't know, just some random homeless guy write the words in the bubbles and nothing even makes sense, or you just say, forget it. We'll just have no word bubbles at all. Well, actually, that'd probably do pretty good. But if you put an absolute garbage story, then you're going to suffer. It's not going to do as well as a coherent story. But the orders for the book, the people are going to pick up the book. They're going to do it for the art. A good writer is important for comics, absolutely. An artist is going to sell that book. That's my point. I think that, and I think it's very strange that right now in 2021, it feels like the publishers and the industry bend over backwards to try and prop up this, lack of a better word, this falsehood that the writer is somehow more important than the artist. But we all know that's not true. Everybody knows this is not true, but the comic industry has weirdly tilted itself to put the put the writer first in a lot of cases. Now, the writer does need to come first in the sense that the writer needs to write a story for the artist to actually work on. Sometimes the artist is the writer, and so that, but it starts with an idea. It starts with a story, and then art is created or drawn. You could argue that the story itself is art. I understand. You get my point. Fine. But in terms of what's going to move the book, what's going to sell the book, I'll tell you right now, it is an art-driven field. It's an art-driven medium. If you've got a great artist on a book, it sells. And I think the industry is, to some extent, I don't know, screwing itself by continuing to pretend this is not the case. You look up and down, and how books are sold and how books are put out. Right now, they are preferencing the artist. It's like, oh, what's Jonathan Hickman have to say? What's Bendis have to say? What's Tom King have to say? What's Mags Visaggio have to say? What's Danny Lore have to say? What does Vita Ayala have to say? We can go through all the different This is how news articles and other things are written today. But the people buying the comics, they're moved by the artist. Always. Donny Cates is a big deal. He moves books. He writes stories that people want to read. Absolutely. There's a massive difference between a Donny Cates Ryan Stegman book and a Donny Cates, some rando artist you've never heard of that has no grasp on anatomy book. They're going to sell much differently. And again, this isn't a guess. We have numbers to prove this to us. We know that's a big deciding factor. Now, conversely, if we put Ryan Stegman in with, I don't know, it's just some rando writer nobody's ever heard of, the book still seems to sell well because people are buying off art. Now, here's the place where I think comics is incredibly hypocritical. If you look at how artists are promoted, they tend to make sure that they match up high-tier artists, high-profile artists, with bigger name writers. They're comfortable matching up bigger name writers with lousy artists or unknown artists, I should say. And the sales prove it out. Right now, I mean, here's an experiment I'd love to see them do. Take Art Adams, take J. Scott Campbell, take Brett Booth, take, I don't know, any Jim Lee, take Todd McFarlane, take some of these top-end artists and throw them in with an unknown writer. You rarely see it. Why do you rarely see it? Because inside of comics, inside the publishers, the editors, they will say, well, we won't waste an expensive artist on an unknown writer. We got to put them with a bigger name writer. Okay, why not though? If you believe that the writer is what moves the book, why is it that you won't put more expensive artists on just, anyone? Why are you saving them for just certain people? It's because you know what everybody knows. Art's moving the book, but we're continuing to prop up this fantasy that the writer is somehow vastly more important than the artist. Now, it's worth saying at this point, many writers, and I mentioned his name earlier, Donny Cates. Donny Cates, if you look at his interviews, you look at what he says, he goes out of his way to talk up the artist. Philip Kennedy Johnson goes out of his way to talk up the artist. When you look at the interviews, I don't even know if they know they're doing this. I hope to ask them one of these days, but you heard it from Joe Casey from his interview. You've heard it from people. A lot of writers do say, I'm working with very talented people. I'm working with amazing artists. They're making the story really come to life. They know. They're not pretending. It's not them. Most writers do acknowledge the fact that amazing artists are what's moving the needle. There are a few writers out there who make it all about themselves. You've seen those too. But the problem's not that level. The problem is at the publisher level, where the publisher consistently, constantly promotes the writer. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that editorial tends to form a relationship with writers, and the kind of this circle of friends tends to exist there. And they have done a lot to overly promote the writers. You have these writer summits, you look at the X Office and you see we got a Zoom call with all the writers on this call. Why not the artists? Arguably, the artists are going to be a lot more significant to the success or failure of this line Why are these calls always to the writers? I get that the writers are going to share story ideas and everything else, but the artists are going to draw them, and the artists are going to be the ones that are going to move the needle in terms of the sales. Point blank. If you're over in the X office, Pepe Larraz is doing your art. You know he's a popular artist. You know he brings sales and eyeballs. So you know you're going to put him on the main book. You know that you put Ed McGuinness on the Avengers title for a couple issues to kind of get things going. You get Sarah Pacelli in there to do some art. And then by issue 3 or issue 4, you've downgraded to some unknown artist, maybe a good person, by the way, but somebody who clearly has less experience, has less skill, is less of a name. Why the bait and switch? Why is it you're paying for Alex Ross covers for your comics? Why don't you just, increase the font size of, whoever's writing this book? Saladin Ahmed is writing this book. Who cares about the artist? It's Saladin Ahmed, superstar creator of Saladin Ahmed. But you promote the art because you know the art is what's moving the book more than the writers. But you continue to play this game that the writers are more important. Again, please don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying the writers are unimportant to comics. Of course they're important. But at the end of the day, the artist is more important. Flat out. It shows up in the sales. It shows up because no matter how great your story idea is, somebody has to visualize it. There's plenty of writers who have amazing story ideas that go nowhere because they get an artist who isn't capable of rendering that vision, and it doesn't get communicated, it doesn't sell. I think it's time for the comic industry to return or go back to the time when the artists were hailed and respected, because that's more in line with their customers. In the 80s and the 90s, certainly people talked about, Denny O'Neil and Chris Claremont and Frank Miller and others who were writing amazing things. Ann Nocenti was doing some great stuff. Louise Simonson, as I mentioned before, great stuff. But comic industry did far more aggressively promote Mark Silvestri and Jim Lee, Eric Larson, Todd McFarlane, Rob Liefeld, Gary Frank, all kinds of names up and down the line. George Perez. There absolutely was more emphasis on the artist. And shocking, the business was more healthy, made more money. That's, I think, this is one of those giant disconnects between the comic industry and the customers who are putting down money. The customers care about the artists. The publishers continue to give signs and signals and indications that the artist is less important. The customers know that's crap, and it creates this disconnect. Anyway, tell me I'm wrong. Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe. Fundamentally, I think this is an artist medium. And if you can't reconcile that, you're fighting natural selection. You're fighting gravity at that point. Thanks for listening.